welcome to Kieran Watton, a new external board member. Kieran's got a great amount, good amount of experience in the Port of Aberdeen and a good, I think, a slightly different perspective that he brings to the board, and I'm looking forward to the contribution that he can offer to Nestrans. So welcome to Kieran. And I'll just, on that note, I know. Oh, sorry, Ian.
Thanks, Chair. Apologies for being particularly dense, but wasn't...
You said it, not me.
Oh, you went a slap?
Yeah.
But Mr. Finch, Paul's letter, even text message even of the 17th about items being taken as read. Is that a suggestion that we don't discuss those items? So I say I was being dense. So if maybe for my benefit and perhaps others, you could clarify what's been suggested, that I would really appreciate it.
Yes, just so taken as read means that there wouldn't be an introduction. The idea is that you've read the papers in advance, and you don't need to an officer to talk you through the details. Again, that's an email that gets sent out in advance. So if people see a paper they feel needs an introduction, if you apply to that in future and let us know, we can adjust that. Equally, if you feel it's a paper that is self-explanatory to the point that it doesn't need an introduction, again, if you want to let us know, and we can do that. It's just simply to try and speed some meetings up so we can focus. There's more time for questions and less time of repeating what's already information we have.
Thanks. That now makes perfect sense and also seems very sensible.
Thank you very much. I do try to manage that occasionally, only occasionally. So item 1.1 is the determination of exempt business. We have item 9.1 as exempt. Are we happy to agree that to be held in private? Thank you very much. Item 1.2, declarations of interest and transparency statements. Do we have any declarations or statements? Miranda.
It's relating to, in fact, there's an update of 5.1 on City Region deal. Just a transparency statement that I'm a council appointed board member of the City Region Deal Joint Committee. I don't have an interest.
Thank you very much. Ian, I'm guessing has a similar one.
Well, slightly different. The NHS get to mention once or twice. So can I just make a transparency statement that I am a member of the board of NHS Grampian? As it's a transparency statement, I want to be withdrawing.
Thank you. And Colin online.
Yeah, just to make a statement about the people and places. As part of, I'm on the board of Scottish Cycling and a member of Ithen Cycle Club, who received money through the people and places. So if there's any voting on that, then I'll abstain from those votes.
Thank you. And Ian again.
Sorry, I should also said I'm a member of Cycling UK. I again, having considered the objective test, I don't believe it's necessary to withdraw. So much like the previous comment, well, unlike the previous comment, I won't withdraw if they're.
Get my closer or something, because I really can't hear you.
I'm sorry, Isabel, most folk complain I make so much noise. I was saying I'm a member of Cycling UK, but having considered the objective test, I don't believe it's necessary to withdraw in relation to any matters about cycling.
I'm not seeing any more hands, so we'll move on to item 1.3, the minute of the board meeting of 12th November. Do we have any questions on that? Are we happy to agree that? I'm seeing nodding heads. Thank you. That's agreed. And item 1.4, we've got a note of outstanding matters. Do we have any questions on that? Sandra.
Thank you. It was on the Arbroath item and Appendix A as well. I have to say I was a bit underwhelmed by the report, and I was trying. Couldn't decide if I read between the lines whether you know, it wasn't a terribly glowing report and there was a lot of lessons to learn and so on, and I just wondered if I'd maybe picked that up wrong. And actually it's I haven't been to Arbroath for ages, and so I just wondered, maybe it's been absolutely fantastic and I've completely misread the tone of the report.
Just to say, Councillor MacDonald, we were asked for a sort of a benchmarking report on that scheme. So I've provided at this stage some of the core information relating to that scheme, which we obtained from officers at Angus Council. I think the key thing is to await the 1 year monitoring and actually see how it's been working in practice, and then report on that would probably be my expectation, and just see how it's worked in practice. I think it opened in autumn or September, and it's just a case of, well, let's see what happens when it comes into there, and it'd be very interesting to see how that comes along. And there was no implication in the sparseness of my report as to the success of the scheme. I was just trying to provide a factual statement of how that scheme had come about.
And can I just ask whether there will be the monitoring? Does that include counters and such matters?
The scheme has been funded by Nestrans now, walk, wheel, cycle, whatever, and they do a very extensive monitoring and evaluation process for that. So I'd expect a fulsome report on how that scheme is coming about. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very reassuring.
I'm not seeing any. Oh, sorry, Colin, is that your hand up online? Yes, Colin.
Yes, me again, sorry. Yeah, it was benchmarking, and I'd hoped to see some of the information about what we, both the councils and some of our infrastructure projects were against that. You know, how long it takes for a project to get through us compared to other areas. I know costs is a difficult one because this moved a whole dual carriageway out the way and things. But that was the kind of benchmarking information I was wanted to look for. How, you know, how does it compare with what we are doing up here?
Yeah, we can take that on board. Colin, I wasn't at the meeting when the request was made, so perhaps I picked that up incorrectly. But yes, we can see where we can look to provide that information, given some of the schemes in the city, in the Shire, that have progressed so far. It's difficult to be. It's like trying to get that comparableness about it with the schemes that we have undertaken. But yes, it's a good point, Colin. We'll take that on board. Thank you. I think, sorry, we would come back to the board with a report on that, but I think it would be good if we actually had some of the initial monitoring report and we could wrap it up in one, would be my proposal on that one, so we could take it from there.
Isabel?
Yeah, thanks very much. And I think it is quite difficult to compare it to what we do here in some ways, because it was such a big project, you know, for the town, really, quite disruptive. And there was a lot of bad press about it during the construction, which you can kind of understand because it did disrupt the community. So it would be really good to get community feedback with that, to see if it settled in and settled down, because I think it was tough going for everybody during construction. And I guess there's lessons to be learned from that as well, about how to manage traffic during construction of major operations like this one. So we'll look forward to a report in due course, but it will be at least a year, I understand that.
Not seeing any more hands. Are we happy to note the reports that we haven't, note what we have in front of us? Yep. Thank you very much. I'll now move on to item 2, which is the presentation from Network Rail and from Transport Scotland. So I believe they're online, so I'll just pass on to them.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you very much. I'll introduce myself and I'll go over to Ricardo. It's a joint presentation from both Transport Scotland and Network Rail, so I'll lead off and then hand over to Ricardo. So I'm Alistair Campbellford. I'm the head of rail projects at Transport Scotland. Ricardo.
Hi everybody, I'm Ricardo de Mortas and I'm a senior sponsor for Network Rail.
Thanks, Ricardo. Hopefully the slides will appear shortly. Thank you. If you just go into the first slide. Thanks. Okay, so in November 2020, Transport Scotland published its rail recharge strategy, which also doubles as ScotRail's fleet transition strategy. And that document refreshed the rail services decarbonisation action plan that was first published in July 2020. the world's moved on and things have changed quite a lot since that document was written. And as you imagine, if it's published in July 2020, a lot of it would have been written pre-COVID pandemic. The big change that happened with that publication is we reset our target date for decarbonisation of the traction elements of Scotland's railway from 2035 to 2045. And we've moved forward with a number of fleet procurements. I'm slightly limited in what I can say about those procurements because we are in the midst of a live procurement and we're bound by all the procurement rules that come along with that. So at the moment, we've got 2 live train procurements that cover 3 fleets that actually impact more or less on 4 fleets. So the first one of those, we have a live procurement for replacement of ScotRail suburban trains. These are the trains that operate in the Borders and Fife routes, and also the class 318 and 320 trains that operate in the Strathclyde routes and the Glasgow and surrounding areas. The plan being that the Glasgow trains will be replaced with a straight electric model, and the trains that operate in Borders and Fife will be replaced with a battery electric model. That means the train will operate on a battery when it's out with areas that don't have overhead wires installed. The advantages of that system are that we can electrify and decarbonise for a lower capital cost, albeit we will pay slightly more for the trains than with full electrification. So in Fife, that means the sections that will be electrified will be Haymarket to Dalmeny, from Cardenden across to Leven, and from Kinghorn up to just round about Ladybank there. And the trains that currently operate on the Borders and Fife routes, they are going to be cascaded onto the rural lines, which are the green dotted lines that you can see in that route there. And the trains that currently operate in those rural routes, they will probably make their way to the scrapyard, given the age of them. ScotRail's actually got the second oldest fleet of all the mainline train operators in the UK, and over the next 10 years, roughly about 2/3 of that fleet is going to get replaced. So next we have Intercity, which is again, that's a live procurement. Sorry, maybe skip back there. Sorry, Carol. Yeah, we've also got a live procurement ongoing for the Intercity fleet. And they set out in the rail recharge document, there are sort of 2 options, and the outcome of the procurement will determine what moves forward. The first of those is replacing the HST fleets that operate from the Central Belt up to Aberdeen and Inverness with a cascaded diesel fleet from elsewhere in the UK. And the alternative would be, a a diesel electric option, which would operate on diesel power when it's out with electrified areas. So that procurement's live. Can't say too much more about it, but we're hoping that will reach its conclusion very shortly. Shortly, this means sort of weeks rather than months is what we're looking at, hopefully. So that's where we are today. If you want to skip forward one, Ricardo. And then moving on from that, in coming years, we've got a number of future decisions to make, which will be what happens, what's the replacement going to be for the battery electric trains, the local trains that operate in Aberdeenshire area to be replaced with battery electric. At the moment, that's looking most likely. Depending on how the procurement exercise goes for Intercity, what's going to be the replacement there. And as with rural, we're still looking at what options we might move forward with, and that will be determined in coming years as technology develops, battery power develops, and possibly hydrogen technology as well develops. But at the moment, that's not looking particularly great from a hydrogen viewpoint. So I'll now hand you over to Ricardo, who's going to take you through a much more detailed presentation around the Aberdeen Central Belt Service Improvements Project. Thanks, Ricardo.
Thank you, Alistair. So the publication of Rail Recharge was important for us as well because it does bring together now a whole industry pipeline on investment that is fleet-led. So a lot of our interventions and investment decisions are tied together both from a fleet perspective and an infrastructure perspective. Core to this remains what it is that we're continue planning for in terms of at state end state for corridors. So for the corridor to Aberdeen, we continue planning for the timetable objectives that were agreed with stakeholders as part of the Aberdeen city deal commitments, and those are shown there on the left side of the slide. And to deliver these, we had planned for an integrated project of renewals and enhancements together, and that consisted, in terms of scope, in a modernisation of the signalling system all the way from Dundee up to Aberdeen, including 3 passing loops and station interventions. Now, this was brought together for decision making as part of the investment decision for the intercity fleet and replacement. And as Alistair mentioned, that procurement is now live for that one, and we are awaiting a final decision on it. But following that outline business case, we were then asked to consider phasing options for this particular infrastructure investment to improve the financial case. So as you can see there on the screen, there are the elements of scope that I talked about at a little bit of a granular level and divided in geographical areas from Dundee all the way up to Aberdeen, as well as what has been delivered so far for those elements, which is designed for the Dundee area and the Aberdeen area as well. Now, because of the suburban fleet introduction in Fife and the introduction of battery electric trains there, these trains, we now know that in the future will need to be stabled and charged at Dundee. So for this, when looking at the phasing options of the investment, we have considered the integration of new elements of scope within this. And those new elements of scope are the ones that have appeared on the slide: a new feeder station, the electrification of the Dundee station area, and an electrified new stabling facility there, which will need to be integrated with the elements of scope at Dundee. There are required for delivering the timetable objectives. So when looking across the whole corridor and the requirements, both from an asset condition perspective, a suburban fleet introduction perspective, as well as a service improvement perspective, we have developed a phased approach to delivering these improvements in infrastructure that goes to release timetable benefits in stages. And the phased approach is what is shown here on the slide. So a first phase, which becomes core and essential to introducing suburban fleet in Fife, is the Dundee area and the integration of that scope, with then the Arbroath area, which goes to unlock significant passenger benefits from a journey time and connectivity perspective. And then future stages are the Montrose area and the Aberdeen area, which go to unlock significant freight capacity, as well as then delivering those end state objectives. So on the next slide, I'll go a little bit more in detail, but in terms of this first phase that we're looking to move forward, we're now working towards developing a final business case and presenting that to Transport Scotland towards the end of 2026. In terms of going into a little bit of the detail here, so the first phase, which is Dundee to Arbroath, the one that we're taking forward for investment decision making, that goes to deliver significant journey time benefits and connectivity benefits for passengers on the corridor to Aberdeen. And while the infrastructure work would go and happen at the Dundee to Arbroath areas, the benefits are felt all the way up to Aberdeen. So as you can see there on the slide, the average journey time for the intercity services would be reduced by 16 minutes for the Aberdeen to Glasgow service, by 18 minutes for the Aberdeen to Edinburgh service, and 7 minutes the Aberdeen to Dundee service. And the Aberdeen to Glasgow and the Aberdeen to Dundee services go to meet and actually deliver better than the timetable objectives that were agreed for the corridor. And the Aberdeen to Edinburgh one comes short of delivering that timetable objective. This next slide goes to show what the benefit evolution and incremental improvement looks like across the other phases. So phase 2, as I mentioned, delivers and unlocks capacity from a freight perspective. So that includes a total of 15 paths opportunities. So that is 11 additional freight paths. And once again, these are path opportunities. They're not necessarily taken. That will depend on what the market looks like at the time of delivery of this. And then a phase 3 goes to remove a trade-off from capacity and journey time. And while the journey time reduction does not look significant there, the reduction is not necessarily on an average journey time, but what goes to happen with phase 3 is that the maximum and minimum journey times are reduced closer towards the average. So there's more consistency in the experience of journey time for the passengers on this corridor. For ease and visibility, I wanted to provide some with graphs here just to show what the service change would look like. So currently we operate 3 shuttle services, a Glasgow to Dundee, a Dundee to Arbroath, and then a Montrose to Aberdeen. From a connectivity improvement, the first phase with Dundee to Arbroath goes to replace that with a local stopper that connects all the way from Glasgow to Aberdeen, as well as retaining the opportunity to delivering a peak service from Dundee to Arbroath as well. And then moving to future stages, the service change would look like this. So retaining the local stopper service, an increase in 11 path opportunities for freight, but also the opportunity to also operate the Montrose to Aberdeen peak service as well. Now, to bring that to life a little bit, some example of journeys as a before and after for our passengers. This is an example of a journey connecting Laurencekirk to Carnoustie, and the current service would look like the one shown on the left, and the change would be the one shown on the right. So for the one on the left, you can see that there would be multiple changes, and the overall journey time, including the changes, would be a little bit over an hour. And actually, with that introduction of that local stopping service, they is introduced by the first phase. By Dundee to Arbroath, we can see there that the journey time is significantly reduced as an overall to 33 minutes, and that is more competitive to a similar journey by road as well. And a further example there is that of a journey from Edinburgh all the way north to Portleven. And in that case, a journey with multiple changes of 3 hours 35 minutes will go to be reduced with just one improved and shorter connection at Dundee, which goes to connect an intercity service to the local stopper. And that is a journey time overall, including the change of 2 hours 21 minutes, which is once again more competitive than a journey by road. So just a little bit of a conclusion here in terms of our plan for moving this forward. We have now received funding for delivering the input to the final business case, which would be design. So we have an integrated outline design that is currently ongoing, as well as outline design for the Arbroath area. And we're looking to use those designs and the estimating and the access and all the inputs for that towards a final business case that would be presented by autumn 2026, and we're aiming for around the November date for that. We're also delivering at the same time an outline design for the Montrose area, which hadn't been delivered before, and that is helping us to feed into the development of the investment strategy for the corridor. And the next stage is obviously of investment in terms of both scope that would go to deliver timetable improvements, but they would have to tie into future fleet replacement as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Just a question for myself. I noticed you kind of had, you're looking at how how changes kind of line up between different services. I'm just kind of wondering, in terms of, have you done any work in terms of what's a good time? But if you are having to change time, obviously, like, you can't just teleport from one train to the other. You have to move platforms. Is there any work you've done on kind of how long a time break should be, or you get that kind of middle ground of it's too long to just walk between platforms, but it's not long enough to really go for a coffee or the likes? Have you done any research around about that and how that's maybe featured in kind of where you have to have changeovers?
So the current proposed timetable as shown there reduces the connection time, particularly at Dundee, and that's what that would look like with the Dundee to Arbroath project, and there reduces it to around 7 minutes. Part of the work that timetable planning has done is also to ensure that the change from one service, the local stopper, to the intercity or vice versa, is facilitated by the fact that we are doing some interventions at Dundee Station, for example, where we'd be able to have both services on the same platform. So it'll be just a matter of moving from one to the other. So we haven't yet done work on the optimum time for that, but for now it's been a matter of ensuring that the move from one service to the other is as smooth as possible within the same platform, so reducing passenger movements on that one.
Thank you very much for that. Dawn, do you want to give a question?
Yes, thanks very much. A couple of comments and a couple of questions, I think. Really glad to see the direction of travel that is going here, because although journey times are important, I think it's more important that we are serving all the people along the lines, because there's too many services at the moment that just go straight through smaller settlements like Lawrence Kirk and Portlesson. So I'm really glad to see these stop services coming in. So that's the right direction of travel. Now, you said that the final business case for the Dundee to Arbroath phase 1 is autumn this year, so around November. Do we have timescales for what you're aiming for phase 2 and phase 3, which are the parts that are actually going to impact our area? And then also thinking about the north of Aberdeen, that nothing's been mentioned about anything happening on that Aberdeen to Inverness line, or indeed for the potential of a new line that goes up to Peterhead, Fraserburgh area. So if we could have more information about those areas, please.
Alistair, do you want to take it? Do you want me to take it?
I can take that. So in terms of phase 1, we're looking at a final business case towards the end of this year. That would then see us moving into implementation and having phase 1 delivered, subject to being successful with that final business case, which is a big caveat. We would move to implementation and have those works commissioned for about 29-30. So about 4 years from now for phase 1. As for phase 2 and phase 3, we don't yet have an agreed programme for implementation for them. That will be subject to further business case development, and also the emerging picture as to what happens with some of the fleet decisions that have to be made. So that will all factor into what the plan is to deliver them. So I'm afraid that we don't have a definitive timescale for phase 2 and phase 3. Moving to your last question, it's a wee bit out of my area as to what's happening with future lines and new lines. That's sort of covered by the transport strategies part of Transport Scotland, but I know they regularly review any proposals that come in from transport authorities for new lines and as part of any strategic business case, and they assess that before it sort of comes into the more delivery area that I work in.
Thank you much. I've got.
Sorry, and what about the existing line between Aberdeen and Inverness? Is there any plans for any timetabling improvements there?
I would say we have just finished relatively recently a £330 million upgrade of the Aberdeen to Inverness line just about 5 years ago. The next interventions that happen on that line will be driven by the decisions that are made on the next phase of fleet procurement, which will be the suburban fleet that operates between Aberdeen and Inverness. So as we move into that procurement, that will determine what changes and what timetable alterations and infrastructure interventions have to happen in that route.
I've got Alan and Miranda. Just Alan.
Thank you. Yeah, I could ask questions all day on railways. It's a passionate topic, as most people can see from the ties I wear most of the time. A number of questions just from your presentation. Very interesting. I guess start with a very easy one. You talked about 2/3 of the fleet being replaced within the next 10 years. I take it that's also including the coaching stock as opposed to just the actual power units. That would be my first question. The second one I'll ask it just in relation to that. I'm conscious not with ScotRail, but with other providers that run on the network. They've got issues. The trains just happen to be slightly too long for some of our stations and everything. I just wondered, is there any plans to look at lengthening perhaps some of the stations, etc., or just looking at, again, its ease of access with new, if it is new coaches, etc., just for people getting on and off and actually using the platform, the existing platforms. Another question I had is in relation to freight. I guess the same question would be, you know, it's great that ScotRail, you're looking at changing from what is diesel to alternative methods, whether it be battery electric or just electric, etc. Or I'm just wondering if you're able to comment as Transport Scotland just on what the freight companies are actually looking at. Are they in the same lines regards types of locomotive traction? And also related to that, I noticed that you had a lot more scope for running freight services after doing this than what you have presently. Is that it because you might have a reduction in passenger transport, or why is that? Is there going to be an increased need for that level of additional freight? Just I wonder if you comment on that. And I guess just finally, you've segmented it into, how you put it, Montrose area, Aberdeen. I look at it and I say, where is the boundaries of them? Does, for example, is Montrose just specifically at Montrose, or does it go further north and cover what would be the Ornskirk station? It's just so it's what parts is covered by your areas. Thank you.
I'll take the first few and then I'll let Ricardo come in to answer the question about boundaries. In terms of the fleet replacement, yeah, that 2/3 figure, that refers to just the overall amount of coaches, Councillor. So that's just if you added up all the coaches that ScotRail will have in their fleet, single carriages, and that's where you get to the roughly 2/3 number. There might be some that would go into 10 and 12 years, depending on how some life extension works go for certain fleets, but it's really just number of vehicles. We are looking at what platforms need extended. There's a work stream ongoing there where we were looking at that. I think they've identified a few already. For looking at what those platform extensions might look like, I think Portlethen was one of them, which is an Aberdeenshire area, as part of changing the intercity fleet. And Network Rail have also been tasked to look at, if we are doing works at those stations to the platforms, is there an option to improve accessibility at those stations at the same time while you've got a contractor on site? It's no guarantee that's going to happen, because it depends on what those costs and how feasible it is, but that is part of the platform extension work stream that's being looked at. In terms of the freight question, there's always a difficulty there, because we provide the paths and it's then for the commercial freight operators, or sorry, the rail industry provides the paths and it's then for the commercial freight operators to decide if they want to use them. And that is always affected by a number of external factors, such as market prices, fuel prices, and as demands go up for whatever goods that they're transporting. But both Network Rail and Transport Scotland speak to freight companies on a regular basis, assessing where that demand's going, and also it's our long-term goal is to actually increase the amount of freight in the railway, so we're speaking to them from that basis. The reason for the additional paths going from 4 to 15, I'm sure Ricardo will come in here when he responds, that's really around what in effect we're doing is putting in passing places for trains to pull into, so your passenger trains go by, or faster trains or faster freight train, even overtaking a slower one, you'll park one up in the passing place, and it's a number of loops are planned to do that. I think we'll let Ricardo talk a bit more about that now.
Yep. Thank you, Alistair. And yeah, you're spot on. A lot of the works that we're doing and considering as part of this and the scope of that is capacity interventions. So whenever we're introducing passing loops or changing, for example, the layout at Montrose Station and introducing a bait platform, quite a lot of that work will give, from a timetabling perspective, improvements that can be eaten up either as journey time or performance or capacity. And the end state timetable that we're showing here doesn't show that the increase in freight would mean decreasing passenger services. So for the benefits that are unlocked by that Montrose and Aberdeen area, there's an increase in capacity because we're already starting to build capacity from the south, and it's just unlocking all of that with the further capacity interventions that will happen north. And then if I pick up on the last question in terms of the actual boundaries of those areas, we've obviously raised them at that higher level for simplicity because they're actually determined by the boundaries of the signal boxes as we have them. So actually what they would look like is the Dundee area covers everything controlled by the Dundee panel, which is the whole Dundee station area really, all the way up to Carnoustie. The Arbroath area is Carnoustie all the way up to Inverkeeler, so just before Montrose. The Montrose area would include Montrose all the way up and including Carmont. And then the Aberdeen area would be Stonehaven and then the Aberdeen station area.
Yeah, just so I got that. So Aberdeen's basically stops at Carmont.
Yeah, it's between Carmont and Stonehaven. That's where the boundary would look like.
Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's quite helpful to frame some of this, but I guess the devil's going to be in the detail with all of this. Can I just be super clear with this? So the phase one interventions, you said, are due to be implemented by 2029. Does that mean they will be finished by 2029, or that's when your proposed start date is? That's my first.
Phase one, again, that's all subject to final business case. We're preparing a final business case at the moment that's hopefully due to be considered for funding later this year. If successful, we would look to have the works start on site next year with a view to them being complete financial year 29-30. Possibly some of them might just slip into the next financial year following that. So that's an end date for phase one.
Thank you, that's helpful. I guess in terms of there are some potentially quick wins here. Some of the timetable improvements, will they come forward before that 29-30 date for the actual sort of on the ground stuff?
I think one for you, Ricardo.
So the Arbroath area is the one that unlocks those phase one timetable improvements. So we'd be able for them to come into play following the commissioning of that, which would look like a 29-30. So it will be after that.
Okay, thank you. And I guess then, so obviously phase two and phase three are dependent on phase one being completed. Is that, am I getting my understanding correctly? Therefore, business case for that won't be until that sort of implementation has happened. Therefore, we're looking potentially mid-30s for the implementation of those phases. Am I right in thinking that?
Yes, they are consequential. You only do 2 and 3 once you've done phase one. That, as I said, we haven't got a firm programme for phase 2 and phase 3 yet. So, but they would definitely fall. It would definitely be after a phase 1 is complete.
I've got one more, convener. That's okay. So the 4 freight paths that are included in phase 1, is that in addition to the freight usage at the moment, or is it 4 in total? I'm just unclear on that point.
There is currently 4 freight paths, and phase 1, delivers improvements for passengers from a journey time and connectivity. So there's no improvements in capacity for freight delivered by phase one. So there would be the status would remain for phase one, and the improvement is unlocked by phase two from a freight
Perfect.
capacity perspective.
Thank you, that's clear.
Thank you. Sandra?
Yeah, just to be absolutely clear to me, introducing the local stoppers, there is going to be no dilution of the intercity service as it is at the moment. In fact, there are going to be minutes paired off that as well. Is that right? Is that my thinking?
Yes, the stopping pattern of the intercity service would be just stopping at the cities, because we would then introduce that local stopper that actually properly serves the intermediate stations.
Thank you.
Ian?
Good afternoon. So I've got a question relating to the freight side of things. It's great to see that the routes will go from 4 to 15 paths, but does the scope of this plan address the sidings and facilities required to receive those freight paths when they reach Aberdeen?
They're not currently included as part of the scope for now, but that's, once again, I think Alistair mentioned it before, that's planning for the opportunity of freight paths to be undertaken. For now, the demand is less than the 4. So as part of the planning of the next phases, it's something that we need to look into, and that will become part of the business case for those phases as well, in terms of what the demand would look like and where would the freight then come from and then go to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just one more question from myself. Just, you've talked about journey time, and you've mentioned a fleet replacement as well. In terms of like, from my own experience of using the train, my perception, my experience, a lot of it's got better. Not so much with differences in journey time, but the kind of facilities on board, and particularly since the Wi-Fi rollout has been implemented by ScotRail, and admittedly, the bits that seem slowest are where there's minimal signal and where the Wi-Fi doesn't quite work quite so well. Is that something that's going to be considered as part of the fleet rollout? Just if there's any scope to improve the connectivity while you're on the things, to improve that experience as part of that journey?
It's one that I'll perhaps, not being a fleet specialist, I don't want to commit to something that may or may not be correct, but the intercity replacement fleet will be coming, whether it's a transition fleet, it'll be fully refurbished and modernised, or if it was a new diesel electric fleet, that would be coming straight out with all the most modern technology, straight out the box. So I would be expecting to see an improvement there, but unfortunately I can't give you a definitive answer on that.
Thank you very much for that. I'm not seeing any more hands in the room or online. So in lieu of any other questions, can I thank you very much, thank both of you very much for coming along today for that presentation, and for all the answers that you've given us as well to the many questions that we've asked. So thank you very much for that, and we'll now move on to budget matters in the state as my laptop decides to go black. Sorry. Moving on to 3.1 budget matters. Tina, do you want to take us through that one? Jenny, sorry, apologies, sir.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. This report is the regular update on budget monitoring and forecast outturn positions for the current financial year to enable the board to consider any issues that may arise. Appendix 1 sets out a summary statement of income and expenditure to the end of December 2025 and shows spend of almost £2.5 million. The forecast outturns are also shown and have been updated to reflect some projects that are known to be coming in under budget or not progressing this financial year, and this is the basis for some of the variants and carry forward requests that are proposed. Appendix 2 gives a more detailed breakdown of the claims to the end of Q3 for the individual projects being funded via the People in Place grant and their forecast outturns. Although this is shown to be on budget at present, a number of potential variances are being investigated. As a result, a range of proposals have been submitted to Transport Scotland as alternatives to maximise use of the grant should any underspend be confirmed, and these alternatives have been accepted in principle. In paragraph 5.2, it is stated that Nestrans would be preparing a submission for some additional people in place grant funding for this financial year, and that any award would be confirmed at the next meeting in April. But I can now give a verbal update that a grant variation offer has been received and accepted for the further 50,000 capital that was requested, and Nestrans' pro rata share of the national revenue funding that was available, which amounted to almost 13,500. And these amounts will be formally noted in the April Budget Matters report. Appendix 3 contains the environment proposals that are being presented for consideration, many of which are due to Aberdeenshire Council receiving an Active Travel Infrastructure Fund Tier 2 grant for this financial year towards some projects that had funding from Nestrans, and so the Council are seeking to maximise this grant instead. Appendix 4 then sets out the projects where a continuation of funding from this financial year to next has been requested, along with a short comment as to the particular reason for each request. The Board has been asked to note the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1, note the monitoring position and forecast for the people in place projects presented in Appendix 2, approve the environment set out in Appendix 3 and approve the continuation of funding to next financial year to complete approved projects as presented in Appendix 4. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to try and answer any questions on this report.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any. Sandra, there we go.
Thank you very much. Two questions. One was on page 17, the non-core rechargeable amount there of 78,000, which is mirrored in the income, and it's just called other income. I just wondered what that related to, please.
Yeah, this is the Nestrans manage the Travel Know-How Scotland contract for all RTPs, and we recharge the other RTPs within Scotland their share.
Thanks very much. And the second question was the two amounts come to roughly £1 million that are going to be carried into next year. And I just wondered if that was, right. I mean, we do this every year, but I just wondered if that was roughly in line with what, you know, the amounts that we had before, or was it a bit less or a bit more?
Historically, we have carried forward a couple of million some years, but it has been reducing. I think it was about 1 million last year. It has gone up, I think, because of the Active Travel Infrastructure grant that was suddenly awarded to Aberdeenshire Council. That is the reason that we're now requesting carry forward, because they have to use it or lose it this year.
No, that's fine. Thanks for that answers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands and passing online. Are we happy to agree the recommendations in that report? Great, thank you very much. Item 3.2, the Treasury Management Statement. I was hoping to take that as read. Do we have any questions on it? No. Are we happy to agree that? Thank you very much. Item 3.3, the draft budget proposals. Jenny, I'll try to give us an introduction for that. Thank you.
Thank you again, Chair. This report asks the Board to approve budgets for next financial year, subject to our anticipated funding levels being confirmed, and to agree an indicative 5-year plan covering the period up to and including 2030-31. The budget proposals for next financial year have been prepared on the basis of requested funding levels from both councils and the indicated continuation of revenue grant funding from the Scottish Government at the same level as received this year. The proposals may need further consideration by the Board when the actual allocations are confirmed, once the councils have set their budgets and once the offer of grant has been received from the Scottish Government. The report also notes that proposals are being prepared for Nestrans to again administer a People in Place programme next year, and that confirmation of the actual grant award offer will be provided to a future Board when known. Nestrans has worked with officers from both councils to develop the budget proposals, and the proposed coordination and project development budget is presented in Appendix 1. It's based on a requested 10% increase in contribution levels from council partners and the indicated continuation of funding from the Scottish Government at last year's level. The proposals also include the requested carry forward of funding from the current financial year that was requested in the earlier report, which has just now been agreed. The budget proposals for next year's strategic investment programme are based on the council allocations within their 5-year programmes that were approved in 2025. This indicated funding next year at 2.172 million, although exact allocations are yet to be considered and confirmed. The estimated forecast for investment income of 150,000 for next financial year has also been added when developing the budget proposals. The proposals also reflect the funding from the current financial year that was requested in the Budget Matters report for continuation. Should this have been agreed, which it now has, it will bring the total available next financial year to just over 3.1 million. The proposed strategic investment programme for 25-26 is presented in Appendix 2. The pink-blue shading used within the appendix represents the local authority delivering each project, with pink denoting Aberdeen City Council and blue denoting Aberdeenshire Council, although there is also one project in green, and that's a regional one, and so would be led by Nestrans. It was also a previous audit report recommendation that Nestrans should prepare a medium-term financial strategy covering at least 5 years, and that this contain inflationary costs beyond those purely relating to staffing. The draft proposals for the 5-year coordination and project development budget were based on an assumed continuation of funding from the councils and Scottish Government at the same level as is anticipated for 25-26 and are shown in Appendix 3. This highlights that less project development work will be able to be undertaken in future without an increase in funding allocations. The draft proposals for the 5-year strategic investment programme were also based on the assumption that funding would continue to be provided by both councils at the same levels as included within their 5-year plans that were approved in 2025. The proposed programme is contained in Appendix 4. It should be noted that the 5-year programme won't be an agreed spending plan, as it will be subject to future budget and partner agreements, but it does indicate the potential profiling of expenditure during the 5-year period and can be considered as a basis for preparing annual budgets and funding requests to 2030. The board has been asked to approve the 26 and 27 budgets programmes as detailed in Appendices 1 and 2, subject to anticipated funding levels being confirmed and making any appropriate adjustments following the board's consideration. Note the funding proposals for active travel behaviour change associated with Scottish Government's People in Place programme for 26-27 are being developed and are discussed in a separate report, with any grant award received to be reported when known, and approve the general 5-year programme of works detailed in Appendices 3 and 4 as the basis for future year annual budgets. Thanks again, Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that. Sandra, then Miranda.
Thanks very much. The 10% increase in the council's amount hasn't been replicated or asked for, I guess, in terms of the Scottish Government, although there is you know, it has been a flat cash settlement, or for want of a better word, up till now. How long can that be sustained, do you think?
I'll take that one. I think that there's one of the aspects around that question is the leveraging between the proportion of revenue funding that we get from the Scottish Government, which is about 70%, and the councils is about 30% and 15%. So obviously a 10% increase in the council's increase have then spread out across. I don't do the maths in top of my head, but obviously it is not then a 10% increase to our budget. It's about 2% or less. We have, as a group of regional transport partnerships, made delegations to the Scottish Government about the sustainability of that, particularly in the context of regional transport partnerships being seen to be a more important part of their national transport strategy delivery in terms of going forward. And the Scottish Government, Transport Scotland are open to having those conversations and providing the evidence of the impact of that in future years. So it is, as it stands, it is not sustainable because it shows an incremental year-on-year drop-off of our ability to do what we're aiming to do. Then I think you'll see in the 5-year budget, the revenue budget, there is a diminution in the scope of what we can do.
Thanks for that. My second question was the people in place budgets. I get. Remind me what the places for people was. The funding was, because they're so they sound so alike, but I don't think they are the same base projects.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. I believe, Councillor MacDonald, that was a national level funding that's provided by UK government, and there's been some specific investment in, I want to see, Middlefield community. I understand that, no, so not that. Pride in Place, thank you. Clearly addled. There was spaces for people.
$5.6 places for people in the, yeah.
Through you, Chair. Places for people, that's the Regional Transport Strategy strand. That's what we've called it. That's our strand within the RTS, places for people. So it's the budget allocation we've made to that strand.
Thank you very much. It was just to clear that up in my own head, because I knew it wasn't people in place. Yeah, thank you.
Miranda, then Colin.
Thank you. I guess how to frame this. We are obviously under, as councillors, we're under quite a lot of pressure. Local government is under quite a lot of pressure with regards to budgetary pressures. Should the 10% not be forthcoming from either of the councils, what's our next steps?
Obviously, we would have to review the revenue budget and make the ends meet to achieve the outcomes, the budget settled outcomes at that point. And we would have to look at certain areas which we would not invest in going forward, and see where efficiencies can be made or where we can get better negotiations with, where some projects could either be delayed or put back, or whether there is more enhanced partnership working we can do with the local authorities in terms of that added value. So there'd be a prioritisation and reprofiling of work in that instance going forward.
If I may, the meeting following budget will be April, I think. Yeah, I'm seeing nods. Will there be, should that be the case, and I'm not making any judgments on whoever's budgets, but should that be the case, will you be in a position to report back to April, or would it take a bit more time?
April will be fine, and that's what we're anticipating. We will see what happens with the budgets. We will respond to the budgets, and we will amend the budgets for the board to agree at that meeting.
Thank you. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment on some of the discussion parts and the project details. We don't seem to have I keep going back to this project management, don't have anything deliverables. So, for instance, again, going back to one of my hobby horses, the A92 Marker to Black Dog, we're giving them 228,000 for progression of design of an active travel route. It doesn't say if that is completion of the design, if it's a 10th of the design, it's another year of money to go towards the design. Can we not have something in there that gives me something that I can say, yeah, we're going to get that bit of paper and that's going to be a completed design. We know when it's going to finish, or we're going to do a third of the work this year, so we can monitor that, because that is you know, looking at what it says there may be more in the background that I don't know about, but given 228 just for progression is an open checkbook.
So within City Council, there is more detail and project plans in that, and then within the City Council, there is regular reporting to their Transportation Board, which provides that level of detail. We had a good debate when we had the workshop at the last meeting around how we might be able to provide that level of project overview. And again, that is still our intention, to provide that for selected projects on an introductory basis, so we can have that sort of dashboard of where elements are in terms of deliverables and that overall program plan, which might be over a number of years. The view was that we would be introducing that in the next financial year, so we can sort of introduce it at that particular point.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just maybe add to that, just to give board some comfort. I hope that design work on this project has commenced. So I have confirmation of that from my colleagues in the roads project team. It is underway, it is active. If it would help board, I'm happy to ask colleagues in roads projects for a copy of their programme and see if we can have that circulated.
Thank you. That would be good for me.
Thank you. Isabel, Jonathan.
Yeah, it is a similar subject, and for a while we were getting some indication on progress of these projects with Laras about whether they were going in one direction or another. And I just wonder if we could actually have a rag of projects so that we know what the progress of them is, because I don't know when these projects were supposed to start. I don't know if they've been delayed for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. It could be anything that we're, and so it would be really good if these project descriptions had some sort of original anticipated start date and end dates, because really, if there's ones that have been in for years and are unlikely to happen, there has to be some justification for them still being there. And I think I would like to be able to do that bit more scrutiny of these to make sure that they are progressing and viable projects.
Okay, so obviously we still have got to come to the progress report, is in item 7 on there, which does have that RAG indication for that financial year. But as I suggested, we would probably seek to just look at the projects in terms of a major or a medium or a minor project and provide appropriate sort of dashboard for that going forward.
Sandra.
Just to add a little bit to what Isabel was saying, what concerns me sometimes is that we do get design work and all that upfront stuff, and I sometimes wonder how long its shelf life lasts, because you then come, you want to get onto the business case side of it, and some of the data has changed significantly and so on. And I've never really had a good handle on that with long-term projects, both inside the council I'm a member of, or Nestrans, and sometimes you worry that, well, worry is the wrong word, but you wonder what if something is actually going to be fit for purpose when it comes to the next stage, because some of the design work or some of the thinking it was a long time ago, and actually some people around the table can be completely new to some of it. And of course there are always projects that come along and leapfrog over some of the ones that have been on the books for a long time, as Isabel mentioned as well. But it's just to have that broader strategic oversight of some of these, I think, would be very helpful to the board.
Thank you very much for that. Are we happy? Are we happy to take the draft budget proposals in with the recommendations? We're happy to agree that. Agreed. Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the director's report, and I'll pass on to Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair. Number of items are covered in the director's report with a corresponding list of recommendations. First of all, I'm just pleased since the last board to confirm that Dr. Caroline Hood, to give her a Sunday name, has been appointed the strategy manager to support me in Nestrans. I'm delighted with that, and also just to confirm that we are progressing recruitment for her replacement and also for a specific people in place officer, as was agreed last February, going forward. We continue to have strategic liaison with Transport Scotland across the piece, and that has included that discussion on RTP funding. And there was a paper that actually went up to the COSLA Environment Committee as well on that recently as well. Obviously, but we're operating, as we know, in a constrained funding environment at national, regional, local levels. One element which is of interest and we've been following up with was a presentation on a workforce mobility project, which is trialled successfully in the Borders area as part of their city region deal. And there's proposals to see how we can roll that information data out regionally across the nations, such that we can also get opportunities to play with that particular tool. And that would be quite useful, I think, in the coming year. In terms of the Bus Alliance, we continue those discussions, and it's good to see progression on the Grasshopper ticket scheme now available as an app, helping people make those journeys across operators. We continue to be active in the community planning world with the Health and Transport Action Plan, the Regional Economic Partnership, and the Get About Partnership, and that the responsibility for that for the current year goes across to Aberdeenshire Council, but it's good to see we've had a successful Be Bright at Night campaign as well over the winter period as well. Just after the last board meeting, we were invited as a regional partnership to submit an expression of interest for a £2 bus fare maximum pilot submission. And I know that we had a successful short life working group amongst partners with bus operators and a range of regional stakeholders that really came together, I believe, to make a strong case for why that should be the Nestrans area. Given the different contexts that we had, we actually thought that was a good idea for an example for the rest of the country, because we had the urban, we had the interurban, we had rural areas as well. I'm afraid to say that our bid was not selected. The bid, the submission was taken, a joint submission by Hightrans, Highlands and Islands, and Zetrans in the Shetland area. So congratulations very much to them. The feedback we received was that our bid was very good. We were very close in terms of that bid, and there seemed to be a small differentiator on one of the technical questions that we were told was the difference between our two bids as well. We were not provided with any sort of financial differences as part of that feedback. The annual report, I've had a couple of circulations of that around board members. We discussed it at the last meeting. A separate highlights report has been prepared and is presented as Appendix D. A finalised full report has also been prepared, and we place that on the members area of the Nestrans website. And final approval is now sought to finalise and publish those documents and distribute to key stakeholders. And if approval is granted, we do a press release, which looks back at that 24-25 year, but also starts looking ahead or providing commentary about some of the key achievements we've also achieved in 2025 going forward. And finally, in terms of future board meetings, and I've discussed this with my vice chair as well, a proposal to host the September meeting in Stonehaven. If people are content with that proposal, the meeting we had in Ellen in June, I thought was very successful in terms of seeing a wider part of the area. Conferences, seminars and presentations are highlighted in Appendix E, and then some information and news releases and press coverage is provided in Appendix F. So quite a lot of detail in that report. I'm happy to take questions of anything you'd like to, or we can move to the recommendations. Thank you very much.
I'll quickly come in first, and then I've got Sandra after myself. Just firstly, can I apologise to Caroline for not mentioning it at the start as well, and welcoming her new role, so I'll just add that in. Just you mentioned the workforce mobility project and that it was successful. I remember seeing the presentation for that. I think successful is almost underselling it. Is it possible to give a bit more context to what successful was there.
The whole essence was a synthesization of travel data, bus timetable data, but also where the vacancies were and employer needs as well. And by synthesizing that data in sort of a GIS plan, they were able to significantly increase the uplift on a number of bus services in that particular area, but also they were far better to link in workers to vacancies, particularly those who had that public transport. So it's almost like application of data, but not just travel time data, but looking at population and workforce data to bring that together. And they're also doing that analysis at a local plan level as well, looking at new settlements and how well the public transport networks would assist with that. But that was a significant uplift to the viability of a number of perhaps borderline bus services in that area, and that work, when they made the changes, provided them with a particular uplift in that area. So hence the enthusiasm with the other RTPs and with Transport Scotland to see if we can take that opportunity forward. And indeed, this morning we were having discussions with the guys down in Borders who operate that service, and we're looking to pilot that ourselves in due course, or in short order, in fact, in terms of how that might play out, and we can learn the lessons of how that works and how that could be applied for our supported services, but also our commercial services in this area as well.
Thank you for that, and I'll pass on to Sandra.
Thank you very much. It was really just to ask on page 56 when it's mentioned the Bus Users UK manifesto. If you do get a copy of that, it would be good if you could maybe pass that around, Paul. Secondly, just to mention, your picture doesn't look anything like you in the report, Councillor Hutchison. But thirdly, just to say congratulations to you, Paul, for, I thought, a very excellent article that was in the P&G on the back of that interview, and I think put forward Nestrans' position and our aspirations really well. So I just wanted to put that on the record, Chair.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. Do you have any other questions at all for? Nope. In that case, we're happy to agree the report in front of us. Agree. Thank you very much, and we'll move on to 4.2, the Nestrans manifesto asks, and I'll pass back to Paul for that.
Again, thank you very much, Chair. Again, this is something that we discussed. We had a good discussion in November around these manifesto asks and how we were presenting it. We've gone away, we've done some reflection on that particular discussion we had at that particular time. Other RTPs are doing this, and there's like a national RTPs ask in terms of what we can offer, but also making it more regional specific. The tact that I have taken is to take our existing policy ambitions, which are well established in policy and around this table, and just to twist that to the context of the Scottish Government elections, because it is people in the Scottish Government who would be responding to this, so perhaps more on those national projects and proposals going forward. There is like a one-page sheet which has got our 9 asks, and then we've got more details sitting behind it, and the aspiration would be to, before distributing that, to perhaps present it up to make it slightly more presentationally attractive in terms of that. And I'm seeking approval for that so we can get that distributed. Note the accompanying set of RTP collective asks, and also the final point was just to note that we've got the guidance on the pre-election period will be following that of City Council and Aberdeenshire Council, and that kicks off on the Monday 16th of March.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions at all on the manifesto? Jerry.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Paul. I think this is extremely useful. Just a couple of points for the board to consider. What about adding indicative costs at today's prices, stating indexation would need to be applied for future years, just in order to give prospective MSPs the opportunity to consider the scale of the ask that we have here in Grampian, or specifically in Aberdeen City and Shire. Also, I guess picking up on points made by councillors earlier in the meeting about adding approximate timescales into this in terms of when we might be ready to invest and where we're at with specific business case proposals. And finally, perhaps under the ensure a safe, reliable and resilient strategic road network, I wouldn't want anyone to consider that the key regional investments needed included the 4 bullet points was all that we were asking for, and perhaps suggest maybe rewording that section a little bit. Thanks, Chair.
No, I welcome those comments. So there are aspects that lend themselves to perhaps a little bit more detail, but there's some other aspects where it might be more difficult to provide that level of certainty in here. But certainly the scale of the ask, where we have understanding of those timescales or where it is different, could be added as well. And I think you are suggesting, I didn't quite, the microphone wasn't quite as clear, but just a slight rewording around those 4 bullet points, though, that it was these, but there are other aspects as well. Was that correct, Jerry?
Specifically the first item, ensure a safe, reliable and resilient strategic road network, Paul. The way it's worded could be interpreted that the key regional investment needs include, i.e. the 3rd paragraph, is what we're asking for, and I think we're asking for more than that. But these are the biggies.
Yeah, they are indeed the ones that are there. They are indeed the ones actually that are resting with the Scottish Government more than the specific schemes that rest with the Scottish Government in particular at this particular time. So there's that to what extent we dilute those with something else, but there might be a form of wording that we can accommodate that sentiment. Thanks.
Thank you.
Would it be possible just to have include the following, which currently set with the Scottish Government, even just to get that context of what those 4 are? Do we have any other questions on this? I'm not seeing any hands in the room or online. Then with the comments from Jerry, are we happy to agree that paper in front of us? Yep. Thank you very much. We'll move on now to the Aberdeen 5.1 Aberdeen City Region Deal update. And Claudia, do you want to give us the introduction?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the strategic transport elements of the Aberdeen City Region Deal. It highlights recent progress across key work streams, including completion of the Mobility Hub network scoping work, both for Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen City, ongoing development of the Ballater Mobility Hub and the coach parking proposals, the refined scope of the A90, A952 design work, focusing on Tull of Burness and Cortes Junction, and the battery electric heavy duty vehicle feasibility study, which is now nearing completion. And I can also confirm that the 2 material change requests, which are highlighted in the report, have been approved by the Joint Committee on the meeting on the 13th of February 2026. This is the refinement of the A90, A952 project scope and the reallocation of the hydrogen refueler funding to support the Ballater coach parking development and the new drones and future logistics study. Following approval from the Joint Committee, we are now working through the process with the City Region Deal Programme Office to advance them, and further detail on all individual work streams is provided in Appendix A. And the board is recommended to one, note the wider progress being made on the transport elements of the Aberdeen City Region Deal strategic transport appraisal workstream as detailed in Appendix A, approve the publication of the Mobility Hubs Network Scoping Project technical reports contained in Appendix B and C, note the proposal to further develop the coach parking element at Ballater to REBA Stage 3, subject to the Joint Committee approval, note the refinement of the A90, A952 DMRB Stage 3 project to focus on Tull of Burness and Cortes Junction in order with to fit with Aberdeen City Region Deal funding and program constraints, subject to Joint Committee approval. Note the proposal to commence a new study on drones and future logistics, subject to Joint Committee approval.
and provide delegated approval to the partnership director to award tendered contract for forthcoming city region deal funded study to explore drones and future logistics, subject to satisfactory tender exercise, award report and approval from treasurer and procurement officers within a budgeted value of £150,000. And the verbal update I've just given in terms of the joint committee decision, on the two material change requests. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have? I see. Sorry, Don.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Claudia. Question about item 12 in Appendix A, this in the Strategic Transport Studies updates about the Lawrence Kirk Mearns connectivity, which very much links back to our manifesto ask for rural connectivity, because transport poverty is a real thing, especially in that area. So just wondering what timelines we might have on how fast the study has actually progressed, what's been done already, and when it expects to be complete, and when we would get the chance to review it, or if we would get the chance to review it.
Yeah, sure. We have appointed a consultant under the scheme framework, and we're currently in the process of working on the scope in terms of like the and the what's the word well, basically the start of the commencement of the study. This is due to take place in mid-March, and we are looking to get it completed by the end of summer, and it will be brought back.
Thank you, and I'll just ask a wee question as well. Just there's a wee line in the Aberdeen City Region deal is now ready to final year of its operation. It's a formal element of the deal finishing at the end of March 2027. And we'll work to continue beyond this date to close out protocols and evaluation. But in terms of the City Region deal, this is the first City Region deal that I think that runs out. They are the ones that were agreed earlier with a 20-year period. So we're the first one that we've run through an entire City Region deal. So possibly definitely not just for Nestrans, for a wider issue, but kind of what comes after that? Is there any comment about what comes next?
There is no firm commitment provided by Scottish Government or the UK Government about what comes next. There's no firm commitment for City Region Deal 2 or anything along those lines. Obviously, that will depend on, dare I say, elections and issues like that. However, there is a debate around, and proposals are being floated for future regional models of funding, and that's been through COSLA and aspects along those lines. Regional transport partnerships do form part of that conversation. They're looking at helping to provide seed funding for regional economic partnerships in terms of how they might see it there. But I think the important thing is that the regional model or regional funding has to look different in different parts of Scotland as well. So it has to have that sort of flexibility. But there is a policy debate ongoing at the moment within Scottish Government and the UK Government. But I think we're still working through what that might look like. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other hands. Are we happy to... Apologies. Oh, sorry, Don, on you go.
No, it's okay. I had another note here, which I've just discovered. Looking down on page 136, where it gives us the maps of the hub points when we're looking at the mobility hubs, it's really noticeable that they are all in the north, and the south of Aberdeenshire is devoid of additional hub points, which as someone who represents the south of Aberdeenshire is very disappointing. Reading through the report, it did sort of say that, and I realise this is City Region deal, this is not Nestrans that's done this, but the prioritisation list, and there was very much, I was sifted out because there's already 2 in kind of thing. But then when other ones are taken out, others aren't reassessed. Especially when this report was, what have I written down here? The report was actually kind of written quite a while ago, I think, or the assessment for these hubs was done in 2023, 2024. But in the south, the situation has changed with the introduction of EMBA services and things like that. So places like Foorden, would actually make a really good hub, because one, it's got an underpass, so people can get from one side of the dual carriageway safely than another, which isn't available anywhere else along that corridor. There is potentially land there. I mean, obviously that would need to be gone into for road for parking for people to be able to use the bus there. You know, do that modal shift while they're travelling, drive there, have somewhere to park, which isn't just outside people's houses, blocking them off, and places for bikes to park up, etc., which would serve quite a lot of small villages for that whole connectivity piece in a rural area. So there are some bits of this that I think, you know, it would be worth looking at again if we have any influence whatsoever in being able to have that ask at all.
Yeah, I think the opportunity with the main study that we just referred to provides that opportunity. I think the concept that they've done here is a good concept, and I think that's something that Martin and his team have picked up on in terms of how they might go forward. Yeah, the data might have been older, and I think there was a methodical go through, but the study that we're doing to the south obviously provides that opportunity to see whether or not there are other opportunities that we can take on board in that space.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands. I'll be happy to agree that paper. Yep. Thank you very much. We've now got an Aberdeen Rapid Transit update, and I'll pass on to Kirsty to introduce that.
Thank you very much. Just to summarise, the report presents a summary of the public engagement that was undertaken to inform the development of the Aberdeen Rapid Transit business case. So the report provides an update on the outcomes of that engagement and a brief update on some of the other elements of the OBC that are progressing at the moment. Before I just go into some of the engagement results, I also just took the opportunity to highlight that the Scottish Government published their infrastructure delivery pipeline on the 13th of January, and this retains ART as a key national project within that, following on from the SDPR2. And it places it among other projects that have a strategic business case in place and are currently working on an outline business case. So it's referenced, just for awareness, as a commitment for mass transit schemes in Scotland's 3 largest cities. So I think that's just positive to see that in there in that publication just now. Just moving on to the engagement, the report outlines the range of engagements that were undertaken during a 6-week programme, which ran from the 30th of September to the 7th of November last year. The purpose of this really was to sort of further test public acceptability of the concept of ART, gather views on the outcomes of the strategic business case, including the emerging network and potential key features of things like art stop locations, vehicles, and incorporation of active travel provision as part of the project. We had more than 2,250 interactions through a range of face-to-face events, drop-in events and online briefing, and we had an online survey which was hosted on the City Council's Commonplace engagement platform, and also shared through the Aberdeenshire Council engagement platform as well. We had a total of 596 survey returns through this, and we complemented that with a separate market research exercise which asked the same questions but to a representative sample across the region. So that went out to an organisation called Scott Pulse, and we had 1,228 responses to that. So a significant response rate when you take the two combined. As a summary, really, I would say the results across both the Commonplace and the market research surveys indicate that support for ART is strong. Respondents broadly agreeing that existing public transport does not meet future needs. A new approach is required. An overall overarching agreement that ART would improve public transport in the region. 65% of respondents positive across the Commonplace survey and 60% across the market research. Sort of highlights, I suppose, the support was slightly higher in Aberdeen than Aberdeenshire, although I would say it remained in the majority across both areas. And support was generally stronger amongst younger people and female respondents, which I think was interesting to note. Negative responses tended to focus on questions or concerns around deliverability, value for money, rather than opposition to improvement in general. And the agreement generally that the 2 routes would improve access to key regional destinations, sort of reinforcing the importance of the city centre, came out very strongly as a destination that people wanted to access. Forrester Hill, the airport and Teca were also high up that list of key destinations that people felt ART could help to improve access to. in terms of that routing, I would say concerns predominantly were around sort of route coverage and people trying to understand how art would interact with their day-to-day journeys. So lots of questions around how art would integrate with the wider bus network, how interchange might operate, and raises lots of questions which I think we were probably aware of and are looking at through the outline business case, but just highlights some of those things that we maybe need to be communicating, that these are some of the things that we are looking at. There was strong support for the proposed stop features, comments really highlighting the need to consider the whole journey, including access to the stop, waiting, onboard environments, safety and accessibility coming through very strongly here. Again, agreement highest amongst was strong across the board, but highest amongst females and younger respondents. We asked about cycling provision as an integral part of the ART project, asked around about the principles that we established as part of the strategic business case. The opinions differed a bit more on this, I think, reflecting a wider discussion around how road space is allocated to accommodate different modes. Agreement, unsurprisingly, was higher among cyclists compared to car drivers. And I think responses here will help us to inform a more targeted engagement with cycling groups, but also with disability groups, and that will be part of the outline business case as we move forward. The results showed a clear preference for the zero-emission tram-style vehicles that we're promoting as part of ART, a 75% positive response on the commonplace engagement platform for that, 64% in the market research. And I think that indicates very much the vehicle's role in shaping that sort of service identity and distinguishing it from the wider bus network. We've highlighted in the report how the findings from that engagement, there's lots in there, and we will continue to analyse the sort of different segments of those survey responses for different issues, but very much looking to use the results to inform the development of the outline business case, and then to supplement that with more targeted follow-up engagement with specific groups over the next 9 months to support the development on things like the scheme design. So some of the key destinations and stakeholders that are along those routes, inform that design, and I think also more targeted engagement with, like I say, cycling groups, disability groups, and there was a number that expressed a real interest in us coming to speak to them as we move forward. The report also just provides a summary of some of the ongoing work that's happening on the OBC, which I should mention is being funded through the Aberdeen City Region deal. We have been working on smartening the transport planning objectives, which would be a central process of an early phase of that. We've been doing some preparatory work to inform the modelling, reduce some of the risks, and make sure we're understanding how that model is responding a bit prior to moving into testing some of the options. A joint network review is being done in partnership with the bus operators. It's quite an integral part of understanding the delivery of Aberdeen Rapid Transit and understanding how bus operators see ART integrating into that wider bus network and establishing whether ART can be delivered through a partnership approach. So we've just started a round of engagement with the bus operators just now, and that will be a series of ongoing engagement as we work through the business case. Continued development of infrastructure requirements design, ensuring alignment with other projects, lots of discussions on the active travel elements, and around about looking at options around halts and junctions. And I think as well, just considering early consideration of some of the fares and ticketing requirements, just keeping an eye on emerging technologies and approaches, and reviewing what's happening at a national level on that to make sure we're progressing in alignment with that. I'm happy to take questions on that. The recommendations are primarily around noting the outcomes of the engagement, that engagement will continue to inform option development. It's part of an ongoing approach to engagement. We will further down the line be coming out with an engagement on the outcomes of the outline business case, and to know the progress on the wider OBC in general. Thank you.
Thank you for that. A wee question for myself, and I'll take in Ian. Just you've given the kind of like the positive that the majority of people favour this, they want to see it. Could you just, in terms of other public transport projects or other projects in the cities, you have to put that into context against other projects in terms of some rough context as to that?
Yeah, sure. I think probably our historic responses to some of the public transport consultations in the past has very much informed how we went about this engagement. We wanted to make it available to the public and stakeholders as a whole, but one of the reasons we did that market research element as well was to make sure we were getting a representative sample across the region, recognising that I suppose these online services are self-selecting to some regard. So I think it's an incredibly positive view, to be honest, in terms of the support, in terms of things, public transport schemes in general, active travel schemes. I think it's incredibly positive. So I think it gives confidence as we move forward on that high level concept.
Yep, thank you very much. I'll take in Ian and I'll take Alan after that. Ian.
Thanks. I wonder just around the bus company attitude. And I appreciate that the ART would be positive and say will stop less frequently in routes than current bus routes. But given that ART will run on sort of main arteries in and out of Aberdeen, which are presumably also amongst the more profitable of the bus company's current services, they'll undoubtedly suffer a loss in income. How are they feeling about that?
So I think one of the things, as we moved through the strategic business case, became quite clear. You can't just put ART on top of the existing bus network with no implications. There are absolutely implications for services that run on those corridors. And that is something, that is, I suppose, the principle behind these joint network review. There's a recognition, and we've discussed it through the Bus Alliance, that ART has an implication for that wider bus network. And we want to try and work through that with the bus operators to understand what that implication is and what their likely reaction to that would be, and are they willing? What's their sort of appetite to work in to develop a partnership solution to delivering both ART, but also taking the opportunity to improve the bus network as a whole. So I'd say it's been a positive start, but yes, I think we need to get into the detail of those discussions to understand the impact and their ultimate reaction to that.
Thank you. I've got Alan, then Isabel, then Miranda. So, Alan.
Okay, page 208. Just I'll reference the slide. It's the ART destination preferences. I find this slide very interesting. It's a 22% in terms of none of the above. So that's the destinations, etc. So I read that as anywhere from 1 in 4 people that responded to 1 in 5 people that responded wouldn't basically use or wouldn't travel to any of those destinations. So I'm kind of like saying, well, a quarter of the population find no benefit to this. Is that, I mean, maybe I'm going too far with that statement, but it's certainly something that's a concern. Then I look back and I say, right, on the left-hand side, picking up a little bit from what Ian had, if we improved the bus routes in there, you would basically nail out the top 4. Links to the city centre from the airport to P&J Live and to Forester Hill. I'm curious what ART's actually doing here. Is it would actually improve the linking, improve the service, everything. But if we actually just had, improved some of just the buses or the transportation in general between there, it would actually knock that out. So I'm just curious, and how do you interpret these data?
It's a good point, and I would sort of I suppose point out the slight difference we had in terms of the responses to both the online engagement versus the market research. We had a greater proportion of city people responding to the online engagement, I think as a reflection of some of the drop-in events where we did do them across the region, but there was a greater response from city to the commonplace survey. With the market research, there was a higher proportion of Aberdeenshire respondents. Now, we didn't have control over whereabouts in Aberdeenshire they were responding from. It's part of a panel of around 4,000 people that it goes out to. We had, say, 1,200 responses, but those would have been responses from people across Aberdeenshire. So, and the nature of the rapid transit project is that it will not impact on many people across Aberdeenshire. It is an urban scheme, and in response to the question around the benefits of just improving the bus network, I think the strategic business case and the case for change that we've made in terms of bus rapid transit is around about delivering a step change improvement in terms of the wider package of measures. So we're looking at cross-city, a network of 2 cross-city routes. So that's enhancing connectivity from a cross-city perspective, and enhancing the journey times, the punctuality, and the sort of the onboard experience, the quality, and the fares and ticketing as a package that makes it bus rapid transit, that I think you possibly don't get from just enhancing existing bus services. And I think what's been quite clear, and I think that comes through in people's responses around the vehicles, that people want to see a step change in quality of provision, and they want the service improvements as well. But in order to achieve the sort of mode shift objectives that we're trying to do, we need something that's more than just adjusting the existing bus network. And the existing bus network will continue to be important, and that will continue to provide a lot of connections that ART will not. But it's how you can, you know, on these key strategic development growth corridors, you know, improve connectivity to employment, improve connectivity to health. You know, there's a vast majority of people across Aberdeenshire who access Forester Hill on a regular basis, and so I think the figure in the report around the market research, I think, probably reflects that Aberdeenshire, you know, the wider Aberdeenshire responses, if that helps.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Isabel.
Yeah, I think the collecting of information from people is really hard because of all the things. I mean, I'm sitting here thinking, but how do you know what people are going into Aberdeen for?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so today I had 2 things to do. I had to go to somebody in Albine and go to Solstice and then come here. So I was going to take the bus, and I thought, well, if I take the bus, how do I get to Albine? So I just drove in, so I could scoot around those two different places, because it's not simple to just get from one to another, and Union Street's closed as well, obviously. So, but it's that whole bigger picture of why people go for their journeys. And so, how much information do you have on whether people are coming in for work or if they're coming in for entertainment? Because I don't think that many people come into Aberdeen to shop anymore, but I might be completely wrong. But and how many different places do they want to visit? And I probably would take the bus to the hospital because it goes to the door. Mm-hmm. But then my bus from the Shire, you never quite know when it's going to come or when it's going to get to the hospital. So it's not reliable to go for an appointment at the hospital because of the current unreliability of the bus services. So there's so many different things at play, and I think it's really hard to drill down into them. And I just wonder if there is some information, especially with the feedback through the survey company. Have they managed to pick up any of the other nuances about why people do things? And for instance, as well, if I go to Edinburgh, I wouldn't dream of taking my car at the city centre, you know, because it's just so much easier to take a park and ride.
I mean, I think you've sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of the challenges of monitoring the regional transport strategy and understanding how people are travelling. It's really difficult. It's complex, and people have a completely individual needs for all their journeys. And I think you mentioned reliability, and a lot of people, and this hasn't come from this survey. This has come from previous engagements and understanding the sort of problems and opportunities. People choose not to use public transport because of that lack of reliability, and that's a real key objective of ART. It's reliability, and it's speeding up journey times to make that journey time more attractive. So, you know, and I don't think anyone's saying that people need to use ART or public transport for every journey, but it's there for those journeys where it does make sense. And if more people can choose that more often, that does help to shift the dial in terms of public transport use and make it more a more sustainable network overall. So journey times and journey speeds and journey reliability are key, as is the package of complementary measures around about how attractive the city centre is to drive into and around and park, and that's a really key aspect as well.
For a second, but I also think that you need that reliable connected services, and you know, and that's a key to it as well. Because if I take the car to the Bridge of Dawn or whatever, then I'm just going to keep going in Aberdeen because there's always somewhere to park. You know, so, but we need to know that the connected services are reliable too, definitely.
Thank you. Miranda.
Thank you. And I would say, Isabel, the owners of Union Square might disagree with the fact that no one comes into Aberdeen for shopping. It's very busy. Absolutely still open for business. In terms of moving forward, it's a really helpful document to really frame why we're doing the sort of Aberdeen Rapid Transit studies. But I guess looking at the last paper around the city mobility hubs, how do we ensure that we're not doing two pieces of work beside each other, which really are key to link together?
Yes, I think what we've said as part of the art programme at the moment is sort of anchored at each end by a mobility hub, park and ride opportunity. But there's definitely opportunities through the location of ART halts to put those in places where they could potentially become like small mobility hubs, and working obviously closely with Nestrans on that study and the opportunities that are being identified there and how that aligns with halt location. I think there's other opportunities around bike hire as well, in terms of creating halts that fulfill a number of, it's that interchange is really important. So yeah, it's something to we're trying to kind of keep abreast of all of the different things that are moving forward and make sure we're trying to align those as we go.
And I guess, Chair, if I can, Aberdeen Rapid Transit is dependent on funding from other places, whereas there could be progress towards mobility hubs, there could be progress towards the bike scheme, for example, in the soon. So I guess it's just that mindfulness that actually it's a layered approach. All of these things together will improve connectivity for people, accessibility for people to the city centre, but just I wouldn't like to see one thing at the expense of another, and I guess that's sort of my word of caution on that one.
Thank you. I've got a couple of quick questions I'll throw in, and then I'll take in Ian. Just in terms of, again, for going back to the context about approval and just census, what do we have an idea of how many people in Aberdeen currently use, what proportion of people in Aberdeenshire use public transport just now, just to put that kind of 60% support into context? Just I suspect there's maybe a different.
You're testing me there in terms of a figure. Adam, have we got anything from the state of the? We will have figures in the state of the bus network report. It's about 24 million passenger journeys, if that helps. I think the percentage, if I can remember correctly, is probably around the 30%. I want to say. I might need to get back to you on that. I can't.
It was more the kind of. It was more to kind of maybe draw out like that 60% of people who favour Aberdeen Rapid Transit is more than currently uses public transport in the region. That there is support from people who don't use public transport that want to see Aberdeen Rapid Transit. Either they might get it themselves, or they feel it might be an improvement and get maybe other road users to use it and maybe get out their way, even for the lack of.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly say that 68% of responders is far above the mode share for a bus.
Yes,
I can say that with relative confidence.
And it was just, since we had the presentation earlier as well, that's looking at kind of your stopper services and your direct services. Is that maybe like a bit of a comparison to how Aberdeen Rapid Transit and our local bus services might work? Just is that maybe like at a high level, is that maybe a similar idea?
Yeah, so I think that's one of the issues we really need to bottom out through the joint network review, is how stopping services interact with ART. We need to consider how we know you have ART halts, what the need is for separate bus stops as well, how those bus services interact. We want to make sure that ART has a free run, but local stopping services are also very important. So I think that's the sorts of things we need to work through with the bus operators to understand the interactions, and that's something that we're looking at through the Howland business case in more detail.
Thank you much, and thank you to Ian for bearing with me. I'll let you in.
Just some helpful information for Isabel, that if you come in by bus to the bus station, you could go at the 11 or the 11A to Alpine Place, and then that same service in the other direction would take you to the bus stops outside this building. So next.
Separate conversation.
That's an Aberdeenshire issue and nothing to do with me.
I think it's also the sort of journey that might be a bit quicker and sped up with Aberdeen Rapid Transit in place as well, which is maybe which is the benefit of moving this forward. I'm not seeing any other hands, so we're happy to agree that paper in front of us and the recommendations. Thank you very much. We'll move on now to 5.3, the People in Place programme update. Caroline, do you want to give us a wee introduction?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this report just gives the board an update on where we are with the 25-26 programme and reports back some positive results from Q3, and also gives you as much insight as we're able to provide on the 26-27 programme. As my colleague Jenny alluded to, we are still awaiting confirmation from Transport Scotland of that grant award figure. We are in discussion with them and we keep in close contact and keep reminding them that it would be very helpful for us to know this information. The report sets out some key highlights from Q3 and the recommendations are generally around noting the progress of the programme to date and of the future programme. However, I wanted to draw the board's attention to the third and final recommendation. Unfortunately, I do have to advise that due to some unforeseen circumstances, we are no longer able to host the event at Pittodrie as planned. And after the board, you will all receive communication to that effect. So we do apologise and we thank for your enthusiasm and interest on this. We very much hope to be in a position to host a future event celebrating the People in Place programme. But unfortunately, we are not in a position to host that on the 5th of March. Thank you, Chair. And of course, I'm very happy to take any questions on this report.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any questions, any hands up in the room or online. Are we happy to agree that report? Yep. Change. Oh, sorry, with the note, with the change, of course, that you've noted in your thing. Yes. On that, then we'll move on to item 6.1, the Rail Action Plan. I'm hoping to take that as read and just ask if we have any questions. Don.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a comment, really, just a note that an extreme disappointment that Inverurie is not being carried forward further for the accessibility, despite the work that's already gone into that. But can rest assured that I'm sure Aberdeenshire councillors will certainly be pushing for things to happen in the future. And if Nestrans can also exert pressure where possible, not just for Inverurie, but also for Inch and Stonehaven, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure we can look at that. Miranda.
I guess just on that point, was any feedback received as to why that station wasn't successful? It might help us frame it in the future.
It is a slightly odd process, the access for all, in that it is done in a less than transparent manner, perhaps. It is very much handled by the DFT, and yeah, we were, as Nestrans, weren't actually informed of this decision. It was only from social media that we're able to get hold of this information. I'm relaying it to you now, and then follow up discussions with Network Rail and indeed Scottish Network Rail colleagues also found that the process slightly odd in terms of that. However, they have the reasons were they're focusing on it. The stations which had higher footfall, they were looking at stations which had a slightly more advanced design, so they're more certainty of delivery. And then there are also some of the stations that they assessed also had third-party funding available to them. So it is a pity. We had a good site visit with Network Rail Scotland colleagues in Inverurie, I think last year. And they themselves were up for doing that initial feasibility study, and they've said themselves that they were going to complete that feasibility study just in case options change in the future. So we need to keep up that dialogue and keep on pushing, but not only for Inverurie, as we've known, we've already had a discussion about Stonehaven. We know about Inch very much so, and I'll just say there we had there was a good site visit there actually, and in terms of finding a way forward, I think that's a line that we need to continue with a reconvening of that group and seeing what opportunities and progress that we can make in that area of something that is deliverable within the anticipated funding constraints, at least initially, as well. So yeah, a lot of work to do in these areas, and a degree of frustration in terms of that decision.
Isabel, do you want to come in?
Yeah, am I right in thinking that these infrastructure projects like this one, it's only every 6 or 7 years that they take a tranche of them to consider?
Yeah, this is the Access for All fund that DFT and they opened it up for a tranche, and indeed that is how they've taken it forward. So we'll probably need to wait for the next control period, as they call it in rail terms, for applications to open up again as well. Control periods are 7 years, which is a slightly odd number, but it must make sense in the railway world.
Yeah. If I can come back in, thanks for that. Are any other avenues of funding liable to come up that this would fit into? Or are we completely dependent on Department for Transport or Transport Scotland?
For the level of funding that you would anticipate for lifts and overbridges, that's probably a national government aspect. When we were looking at Inch, we were looking at perhaps slightly cheaper options, and obviously that might then fall into the realms of what could be achieved regionally or with some smaller assistance from the national bodies as well. And that's why we're continuing to keep that one alive and push on in that respect, because there could be opportunities there which could be deemed to be A, affordable, but B, deliverable as well within the timescales which I'm sure all of us around the table would deem to be acceptable. Not that it's an acceptable situation at the moment.
Sandra.
It was just a note that I was pleased to see that the East Coast Main Line was again on the agenda. Not a lot of meat on the bone, but I just think it's something that we just need to keep on banging about. And if we get the opportunity to take the lead, either through the City Council, I hope. I don't know if we're actually going to take a place on that board along with the other councils, but we should we should do that and make the strong case that we have been speaking about for decades rather than years.
Indeed, and it's good that Claudia has said she's going to take forward that role in terms of representing Scotland, but also Scottish RTPs as well as Nestrans as well. So we look forward to seeing how that group reconvenes itself and is able to invest the money and get that engagement not only with Transport Scotland but with the new rail delivery body that they're creating down in England as well. So yes, I think that's an opportunity. We look forward to that engagement.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands in the room or online. We're happy to agree to note that report. Thank you very much. Item 7 is the progress report. Do we have any questions on that? Are we happy to agree that? Yep. Oh, sorry. Okay. Item 8 is publications and consultations. Again, do we have any questions or from online or Zoom? Sandra?
It was just noting, I noticed that it was very stark on the page 279, how things flattened during COVID and hasn't really come back again on the chart of climate change plans. So it was just to hope that things do go along that little dotted line south, but we will need to wait and see.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Are we happy to agree that report? And the next item is confidential. Yeah, it is confidential item. So that note, can we pause the recording? And there's no one next. It's no journalists, and it's not a live web.